Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host Zoe Hawkins.
Hi, everybody. We're here this week talking about how to find a coaching supervisor. This is a question we get asked time and time again, so we thought it would make a helpful podcast episode. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, how to find them, where to find them, how to know if you're going to match with your supervisor, how to go about establishing a good match. So, we'll meander through a conversation all about our experiences and how we can help you to find a supervisor that's going to really support you in your development.
I think let's start with what is a coaching supervisor, because some of you might be very familiar with that and others might be thinking, well, what is that? So a coaching supervisor is somebody who is an experienced coach. You want to look for a qualified and accredited supervisor. So this would be somebody that has undertaken a training specifically in coaching supervision and then have passed the application process of demonstrating they've met the standards required, their professional competencies to be a coaching supervisor. So that coaching supervisor is somebody that supports coaches to reflect on the ethics of their coaching, helps them to check for blind spots, things they might not have noticed, reflect on the psychodynamics they might be or that might be influencing the coaching that is taking place with specific clients. A coaching supervisor is somebody who helps a coach to develop their coaching competency. So if you're a coach starting out, you might need a bit more help with that. If you're more experienced, you might need more help with more of the psychodynamics, or the third element of the role, which is around supporting the coach with their general well-being, because we know that coaching is a helping, a supporting, an enabling profession, and there is an energy exchange in in coaching relationships. And also coaches have their own lives going on outside of the coaching work that they do. So a coaching supervisor is really sort of a coach for coaches, but a bit more. Um, so that's what a coaching supervisor is. Zoe and myself are qualified and accredited coaching supervisors. We have supervised people for years on our coaching training programs and also worked with private clients. And you'll find coaching supervisors that offer coaching supervision in a one-to-one capacity, and also coaching supervisors who will support clients in a group context as well. Both of those things, one-to-one coaching supervision and group supervision, are extremely valuable for coaches' development. And they offer different things. So what do you want to add to that? So
What do I want to add to that? I think probably, as you sort of said, starting out with what a supervisor is, it's like, why do supervision is probably another important element before you get to how to choose a supervisor. And as you mentioned, it's a really important part of CPD, it's an important part of well-being. I think the most important piece for me is that challenge, which I don't think you get from other forms of CPD. You know, like a coaching supervisor, it's almost like they're there in the coaching conversation with you. Like that's the level of skill that they have. Like you go and you introduce different challenges that you're having. And I reflect on some of my supervision sessions where my supervisor's like, right, introduce your client to me in an anonymous way, of course, and the way that you introduce your client almost helps them to sort of almost enter into the coaching relationship with you. And it's like another pair of eyes on that work. It's a really supportive and challenging space. And I would say, an essential part of your toolkit and your CPD plan if you are coaching clients. So that sort of sets the scene, I think, for like, so why and what is a supervisor? And I think when it comes to choosing a supervisor, as you would a coach, a lot of it is about the match, the energy and the relationship that you have. So it's worth spending some time thinking about what do you want to get from a coaching supervisor? Like essentially, what are your supervision goals? What are your supervision needs? So what's the type of person that you want to be working on? Because when you eventually go out to market and try to find a supervisor, a bit like a coach, you'll find there are hundreds, if not thousands, of supervisors to choose from. So, how are you going to make that decision? So, you might want to think about, the profile of the person that you want to be working with, the sorts of experiences they have had, how long perhaps they've been a supervisor for, how do they engage in supervision? So online, in person. Um, yeah, so I think spending some time, spending some time really getting connected with what are your supervision goals and the sort of person that you want to be working with is a good place to start.
So let's get into the where. Where do you find a coaching supervisor? If I just talk through how I found coaching supervisor in the past, I think that's a good place to start. So I found out, I suppose, that well, I look at the accredited, who accredits coaches. That's a good place to start. So if you take the EMCC, for example, they have a list of qualified and accredited coaching supervisors. So if that's important to you, you might want to take a look at the list. So you'd go and visit their site. The EMCC have annual awards for coaches and supervisors, and I like to see who's won the award for coaching supervisor that year, because I think, well, they must be offering something special to have been nominated. So it's good to, I think, to look at that if that's something that appeals to you. Do a search on LinkedIn for coaching supervisor and see who comes up, and then I'll go onto their website and I'll look at their style of supervision. How do they talk about supervision? How do they talk about the purpose of it? How do they talk about the way they work with clients? You'll find people talk about drawing from particular psychologies in their supervision practice, and I'll just kind of sense into, does that feel like a good fit for me? And then I'll choose to have a conversation with whoever I might choose to. If I hear a coach talking about their supervisor and saying how amazing they are, I'm like, who is it? And I'll go and check them out, and again, see if that looks like a good fit. And then, even if I've got a current supervisor, I then might think, I might, at the end of like the particular, number of sessions I pay for with my current supervisor, then think, I'm gonna maybe shift to another supervisor, because I like to have that additional perspective. So those are some of the kind of the ways that I've approached it in the past.
Yeah, I found my supervisor when I was training to be a supervisor. So went on a supervision course, and there are a number of supervisors who supervise the supervisor. And I thought, well, if you can supervise supervisors, you're probably going to be a great coaching supervisor. So I started working with a supervisor, and I really valued that relationship and worked with her for a number of years. That depth of the relationship grew. She started to understand my coaching style, and she was able to challenge me in ways. And there was one particular session where we'd covered a number of things, and she said to me, "Oh, Zoe, do you notice how you always bring your male clients to supervision?" And I think that's like for me, that was a really interesting moment that I was like, I hadn't realized. I don't know what the significance of it was at that particular time, but that led us down another avenue. Now, a brand new supervisor wouldn't have been able to necessarily observe that systemic pattern of me bringing my clients to supervision. So I found her through the directory that was associated with the course that I was on. And I guess that is another way. We run training courses, and we've just recruited a team of supervisors. And so an easy stop is to look at who are the supervisors that support our learners. Obviously, we've quality assured them. They are accredited, they are qualified, they have experience. We love them. So if you love our style of work, you're likely to find one of our supervisors that fits with your pattern. And please don't contact us for that. Like, do go connect with them on LinkedIn, follow their style, dig into, as Joe described, whether you feel aligned with them, and reach out to them directly. So that's another place that you could go. And then originally in my early career, I found a supervisor from the directories that you were talking about there, Joe. And other places you could go would be to look at supervision academies, so people who train supervisors, because their learners will often be looking for not trainees, because they are trained coaches, but they will be looking for getting their supervision hours up. So they often offer discounted places to be able to build their supervision hours. So newly qualified or training supervisors, but very seasoned coaches. So you'll still be working with somebody who brings an element of experience. So those are a number of places I think you can go to find a supervisor that you feel aligned to.
And of course, there's the coaching crowd, our Facebook group that's got over 5,000 people that are coaches or associated with coaching. So we often have people posting in there, like, does anybody have a recommendation for a supervisor? And there are discussions there. And, you'll often have a regional, for example, like meetings of supervisors. So I know supervisor I've worked with in the past runs a group in America for supervisors. So you know you can of course just do a general Google search, but the things to look out for are the qualification, the accreditation, as you were saying, what they draw from in their coaching or supervision practice.
I think a practicality around, so yes, there's a where to find it. And then how do you actually find the supervisor that you want to work with? And we would recommend having some chemistry conversations. So as you would, if you were looking for a coach, you might narrow down to 3 or 4 different supervisors and do set up some initial calls to have a chat with the supervisor, share who you are, what you do, and really get a feel for whether there is an alignment in that relationship, because the relationship will be central to the value that you get from supervision. You need that warmth, that trust, that safety, because supervision can be a challenging personal development space. And I think if you have that trust, faith, and confidence in your supervisor, it's like a partnership, and one that you could, as I did, work together for many years. So that's really important in terms of you being able to, build the relationship and safety with your supervisor.
Yeah, I think it's really important to prepare for the conversation. It sounds obvious, but I think it's so easy to arrive in a chemistry conversation just thinking, oh, you could look at your diary and think, oh yeah, I'm speaking to, potential supervisor. Oh yeah, I know how to have a conversation about that. I would I would kind of ask, do you? Do you really? What are the questions that you'd want to ask a supervisor? And also, are you prepared for how you might handle the conversation if you get a really strange feeling in that chemistry conversation? Maybe a feeling that you don't even like. You're not sure what it is. It feels unusual. How do you make sense of that in the moment? Do you have the courage to share that with the supervisor? That's almost like not a mini supervision invitation, but just an opportunity to explore how might we work together? Are you looking for somebody that you immediately feel like you could bare your heart and soul to them or not? Because your supervisor is likely to ask you, what are you looking for from supervision? And if you just answer and say, I want somebody to support and challenge me, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything until you really start to peel back the layers from it. So yeah, I would encourage you to prepare for that conversation, because it is such a pivotal relationship in terms of your coaching business, your coaching career, your general well-being.
Mm. And I think it's worth thinking around what are the questions you want to ask the supervisor? Like, what do you actually want to know? How are you going to know if you're a great fit? The supervisors I've come across that work very creatively. So you might ask, like, what would a typical supervision session look like? And of course, there is no typical supervision session, but it's a great opener to start with. What are some of the ways that you work with your clients? And that might be where they introduce different methods or different tools that they work with. One of the common models that supervisors will work with is the 7-eyed model of supervision, or Theory U is another model. So you might want to ask some questions around, so how do you use those models in practice? What are some of the challenges that I would be presented with in supervision? And maybe like asking about previous client work around, what are the sorts of journeys that your previous like supervisees have gone on? What can I expect for my own development? And of course, these are questions that are going to be quite challenging for a supervisor to answer if they don't know too much about you. But really do think, as you step into that preparation that Joe said around, what are some of the questions that will get you excited about supervision? Get you really interested in building this relationship with your supervisor, because that's the energy that you want to have when you engage in any CPD. And I think if you can feel that about supervision, then that's really exciting.
It's interesting because one of the things that I'm always most curious about, like with a supervisor, is like, what's your sense of me? So, like, as the conversation comes to a close, what I'm really looking for, it's not a test of them, maybe it is,
Mm.
but is just like, what have they picked up from me? not just in the words that I use, but about everything about how I've shown up in that conversation, because supervision, like coaching, is still such a short period of time. You know, in comparison to the amount of coaching that you may be doing, supervision is really short. And I think it's like, how are you going to get the most out of it? And also, is this somebody that will be able to help me with blind spots? Because for me, from supervision, I want a supervisor to help me explore what is currently not in my awareness, as well as the stuff that is in my awareness. But that's what I'm really interested in, is newness, I suppose. So I suppose I offer that kind of a question, you know, like, what's your sense of me, as an alternative style of questions that you might want to consider. Not necessarily that question for you, but something maybe that's catalyzed something in your own mind as you're listening to us talk about what you might ask in those situations.
And of course, be prepared for when your supervisor returns the question of what's your sense of me? Or what's your sense of us? What's your sense of this relationship?
What's the importance to you of the sense I have about you in this relationship? You know, and that is obviously like all the stuff that we love and thrive on, isn't it? Yeah. So I think that's important. And also really thinking about how long do you feel that you might want to engage with this person for, because I think that can impact the work that you do together. So if you already know that you want to work with a supervisor for a year or 3 years, or you know, you've got an idea of the amount of time, that might impact the way you show up in those sessions. Whereas if you're thinking, right, I'm going to work with this supervisor for, you know, 6 months, 9 months, then you may show up differently in those conversations. And your coaching practice may vary during that time. You may not always have a consistent number of clients. And, you know, are you looking to go to supervision and explore themes? You know, are you going or do you tend to go to supervision because you want to take a number of client examples and you kind of want to work through those examples? And how will you feel if your supervisor wants to kind of move beyond that? So that's all of the, like, how are we going to be together? And also, how much are you prepared to learn together about how to get the most out of it? And of course, these are things that you navigate when you're a coach with your client. But it is a slightly different relationship here as coach and supervisor.
Yeah. And of course, there are practicalities to consider around how often you want to meet and whether it is group or one-to-one coaching. So if you're going for your accreditation with the coaching bodies, so particularly the EMCC, they don't currently accept group coaching, group supervision in order to get your accreditation. So if you're engaging in supervision and you know you're coming up to either accreditation or re-accreditation, it's one-to-one supervision that you would need to look for. And also you would need to get a reference provided from your supervisor. So you want to check out if your supervisor is going to be happy to provide that reference at the end or during the engagement to support you with your accreditation process. And group supervision is still valuable in terms of CPD. So it's not that it doesn't count for accreditation, because you can still put it down as a record of CPD that you've been engaging with. So it's just worth checking out with your accrediting body, what are the requirements around supervision, and then think about the engagement that you want to take forward.
Yeah, because if you think about the ICF, the focus there is on coach mentoring, which is different to coach supervision. The coach mentoring for the ICF is about supporting you to develop the ICF core competencies of the particular level of accreditation that you're going for. And just to clarify, from a training perspective, when you're training to be a coach, so for example, training on our coaching programs, group supervision does count towards accreditation if your coach training is accredited. So our coach training programs are accredited with the 3 coaching bodies, but let's take the EMCC. So our learners undertake group supervision on the program, and that is enough with the coach training for them to be able to go for a level of accreditation with the EMCC upon completing their qualification. They don't at that stage need to get additional one-to-one coaching supervision. So it's a great benefit.
Yeah, and a lot of that is because you receive an awful lot of one-to-one sort of feedback and observation throughout the program. So the essence of supervision is very much weaved through the training experience. So If how to get a coaching supervisor has been one of the questions on your mind, hopefully this podcast has really helped to give you some ideas and some flavor of what to expect. So hope you've enjoyed that. And if, as Joe mentioned there, you are looking to experience supervision as part of your training program, it's all incorporated in the courses that we run. So come and check out our courses and CPD offerings on our website, igcompany.co.uk.